Hello, my dears. It's Granny Susan. Today I will tell you an interesting story from my life.
My stepmother was sleeping with my husband for 5 years. I was carrying his child while they laughed behind my back. That isn't my story. At least that's what I used to say to myself when Cynthia first told me. But when you sit across from someone and watch their hands shake over the same chipped coffee mug they've used for decades, when you hear their voice catch on every third sentence, and when you see the way they stare at a wall like it's a memory pressing through, you stop pretending it's just their story. It lives with you too. She told me everything one stormy afternoon in June, when we were both much younger than we are now. I still remember the rain smearing the window like wet chalk, the smell of fried potatoes in the kitchen, and how she lit a cigarette with hands that hadn't stopped trembling since she walked in. She didn't cry. Cynthia never cried. But the way she talked, low, steady, like she was reading out her own post-mortem, it stuck with me. And if you're willing to listen, I'll tell it the way she told me. Cynthia grew up in Clarksville, Ohio. A town so ordinary it felt fictional. Wooden porches with creaking swings, white churches with fading paint, and people who said good morning whether they meant it or not. She lived in a narrow house with her father, George, who worked long shifts at the power plant, and her mother, Agnes, who wore her tiredness like a second apron. They weren't poor, but they weren't far from it. Her mother taught her to patch dresses, slice onions so thin they looked like paper, and smile at men without giving them too much. When Cynthia was 16, her mother collapsed on the kitchen floor. No warning. Just dropped like a string was cut. The doctors said heart aneurysm. Gone in under a minute. Her father didn't speak for days. He shaved his beard the morning of the funeral and didn't grow it back for a year. They were both hollowed out in different ways. Cynthia filled her emptiness with work, school, and silence. Her father filled his with something else entirely. That something came in the form of a woman named Vivian Hayes. Vivian was 29 when George brought her around. She worked behind the pharmacy counter at Wilson's drugstore and had the kind of beauty that made men stutter and women take an instinctive step back. Red hair that never strayed out of place. High cheekbones. Eyes that said she'd seen more than you had and didn't care if you knew it. Cynthia didn't hate her, not exactly. But there was a coldness to her, a way she moved through their house like she belonged there before she'd even unpacked a suitcase. Within 3 months, Vivian was living with them. Within 6, she married George. Cynthia was 17 by then. She kept her head down, finished high school, got a job typing invoices at the grain mill office. She'd eat toast in the morning with Vivian sitting across the table, flipping through fashion magazines and humming. It wasn't cruelty, at least not the obvious kind. It was more like careful subtraction. Little things disappearing. Her mother's porcelain combs vanished from the bathroom. Her embroidered pillowcase replaced with something beige and lifeless. Her place in the house slowly edged out, inch by inch. At 19, Cynthia met Thomas Dillon. Everyone called him Tom. He was 27, tall, sunburned year-round, with arms thick from hauling freight and a laugh that landed like thunder. He drove trucks for the Sinclair Company and smelled like motor oil and wintergreen mints. He was quick with compliments and slow with apologies, which made him charming more than anything else. They met at a church potluck. He offered her a deviled egg, then asked if she liked road trips. 2 months later, he gave her a ring. It wasn't fancy, a gold band with a chipped diamond, but it gleamed like new when she held it under the light. Vivian's reaction was lukewarm at best. "He's older than you," she said, sipping iced tea. "And you don't know where men like that go when they're out of town." Cynthia ignored her. The wedding was modest. A backyard ceremony with folding chairs and lemon cake. Her father stood stiffly in a gray suit, looking like he wasn't sure where to place his hands. Vivian wore blue. She kissed Cynthia on the cheek and whispered, "You'll understand everything one day." They moved into the basement apartment of Cynthia's childhood home. It was George's idea, to save money. Cynthia agreed. Rent-free meant a chance to buy a car someday. Meant a safety net. At first, everything was fine. Better than fine. Tom kissed her neck in the mornings, brought her wildflowers he found on the side of the highway. She hung up his shirts and laughed at his stories. Vivian barely spoke to them, and George mostly kept to his garage. It was an uneasy peace, but it worked. Until it didn't. The first thing she noticed was the cigarettes. Tom smoked Lucky Strikes. Only Lucky Strikes. But she began finding Camel butts in the trash outside their door. When she asked him, he said maybe her father switched brands. Then came the missed calls. The nights he didn't come home. The second drawer of his dresser that always stayed locked. She told herself it was work stress. Men acted strange sometimes, that's what Vivian always said. But there were other signs. Like the night she came upstairs to get sugar and found Vivian in the kitchen in her bathrobe, Tom's bathrobe. She said nothing. Vivian smiled and poured a glass of milk. Or the Sunday Tom came home from a trip to Cleveland with a sunburn and a new tie, the same tie she'd seen in a department store downtown. Still, Cynthia said nothing. She loved him. And when you love someone, you give them the benefit of the doubt until it chokes you. Then she found out she was pregnant. She sat on the edge of the tub with the test shaking in her hand. When she told Tom, he grinned like a schoolboy. Picked her up and spun her around. "We're gonna have a kid," he said. "A little boy. Or a girl. I don't care. You're gonna be a mom, CYN." For a few weeks, life was golden again. He came home early. He cooked her dinner. He talked to her belly like it was already a person. Vivian even crocheted a baby blanket. But Cynthia never stopped watching. She noticed Tom's mood swings. The way he would stare into space when he thought she wasn't looking. How he started locking the basement door at night. How he laughed too hard at Vivian's jokes. And how Vivian touched his arm just a second too long when passing him in the hallway. The final straw, for this part of the story, anyway, came one rainy Tuesday. Cynthia came home early from her shift at the mill. She'd had a dizzy spell and needed to lie down. The house was quiet, except for faint music playing upstairs. She started down the hall, and paused. Her father's bedroom door was open. But his car wasn't in the driveway. She stepped closer. Vivian's voice, soft and husky. Tom's laugh, unmistakable. She froze. Couldn't move. Couldn't speak. Just stood there, heart in her throat, breath caught like a stone. Then the floor creaked beneath her feet. The music stopped. A moment later, Tom appeared in the doorway, shirt half-buttoned, eyes wide like a boy caught in the middle of a lie he hadn't rehearsed. "Oh," he said. Cynthia turned and walked out of the house. She didn't scream. Didn't cry. She just walked down the street, the rain soaking her dress, her arms wrapped around her belly. No one stopped her. She walked until her legs gave out and she sat on the curb in front of the diner. The waitress inside brought her a blanket. She didn't go back that night. She stayed with a friend. And that's where Cynthia's story paused, the day she told me. She flicked ash from her cigarette, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "I didn't know the worst part yet. That came later." And then she stood up and walked away. Cynthia didn't go back for 3 days. She stayed on her friend Leanne's couch, staring at the popcorn ceiling and pretending to sleep when it got quiet enough for thoughts to crawl in. She hadn't told Leanne anything. Just knocked on the door soaked through, eyes blank, and said she needed a place to lie down. Leanne didn't ask. That's the thing about real friends, they know when to leave the silence untouched. The baby kicked that second night. Just once. A little flutter like a reminder, you're still here. You still have a reason. By the 4th morning, Cynthia folded her things, left a note on the coffee table, and walked home. She didn't know what she was expecting. Fireworks? Begging? Packed bags? But when she walked through the front door, it was like nothing had happened. Tom was in the kitchen frying bacon. Vivian stood by the sink rinsing a bowl. They both looked up at the sound of the door. Vivian offered a soft smile, Tom a hesitant nod. "You hungry?" he asked. Cynthia stared at him like he was speaking another language. "You left your coat," Vivian added, as if that explained everything. And that was when Cynthia realized what kind of game they were playing. The kind where they pretend nothing happened, so she'd start to doubt that anything did. Gaslight by omission. She said nothing. Walked past them, down to the basement. The smell of bacon followed her like mockery. Later that evening, Tom came down with a blanket over his arm. He sat on the edge of the bed, folded it neatly, and cleared his throat. "I know you think you saw something," he began, voice low and measured, "but you didn't. Viv just had a headache. I brought her aspirin and ended up chatting for a few minutes. That's all." She didn't even blink. "You weren't wearing a shirt," she said flatly. He paused. A beat. Then a smirk, almost involuntary. "I was changing. We'd just come back from the store. Maybe you got your timing wrong." Her voice stayed calm. Too calm. "Why was the door closed?" He opened his mouth, closed it again. Then, with an exhale, he stood. "You're pregnant. Hormones. Stress. People imagine things." He walked upstairs. That night, Cynthia locked the basement door behind her for the first time. The days that followed were a fog. She moved like a ghost through her own life, trying to appear normal. Because that's what women were supposed to do, wasn't it? Keep up appearances. Fake the smile, clean the dishes, keep the baby safe. She didn't confront Vivian. Not yet. There was something more sinister in that silence, like 2 snakes coiled on opposite ends of a room, waiting to see who would strike first. It wasn't until the following Sunday that things cracked wide open. She was hanging laundry in the backyard when Mrs. Greer, their neighbor, peeked over the fence. "Everything all right, hon?" she asked, squinting under her sun hat. Cynthia shrugged. "Only," Mrs. Greer said, "I thought I saw Tom and your mama, I mean, your stepmama, up at Cole's Tavern Friday night." I waved, but they didn't see me. Cynthia dropped a wet pillowcase. Her mouth went dry. They were laughing, the old woman went on. Real cozy. I figured it was a family thing. Cynthia forced a smile. Yeah. Maybe. But inside, her ribs were tightening like a vice. When she went inside, she didn't slam doors or throw plates. She just sat on the couch and thought. And that's when something clicked. The wedding. Her wedding. She remembered walking into the powder room after the cake cutting and seeing Vivian standing far too close to Tom, whispering something in his ear. At the time, she thought nothing of it. But now the memory was different. The tilt of Vivian's head. The way Tom's hand had lingered near her waist. And then another memory. A letter she'd found once, months before she and Tom got engaged. Folded up behind the couch cushions. She thought it was hers, opened it absent-mindedly. But the handwriting wasn't familiar. Don't worry. She'll never know. You were mine long before her. She'd laughed it off at the time. Thought it was someone's old trash. Maybe her dad's from years ago. She threw it away. Now she realized. It had been written in green ink. Vivian's favorite fountain pen. Cynthia didn't sleep that night. She stared at the ceiling and felt something inside her harden. Not just pain. Not grief. It was something sharper. A resolve. A decision. By morning, she had a plan. She needed proof. No more guessing. No more he said she said. That Tuesday, she called in sick and told Tom she was going to visit her aunt in Dayton. Packed a small bag. Kissed him on the cheek, even. Told him she'd be back Thursday. But she didn't leave. Instead, she parked 2 streets over and walked back after dark. The bedroom window faced the side yard. Curtains thin. Lights on. She waited in the shadows for over an hour. Then she saw them. Tom's silhouette. Vivian's hand brushing his chest. They kissed, slow, familiar, practiced. She didn't cry. Didn't scream. She took a photograph. Leanne had a Polaroid camera. Cynthia had borrowed it weeks ago, for baby photos. She pressed the shutter once. Twice. The click felt louder than thunder. Then she left. The next morning, she set the photos on the kitchen table. Tom walked in rubbing his eyes, sat down, saw them, and froze. Vivian came in a moment later, in a silk robe. Neither spoke. Cynthia didn't wait for excuses this time. How long? She asked. Tom swallowed. Said nothing. Vivian tilted her head. Before you two even started dating, she said simply. Cynthia's heart stopped. She looked at Tom. Is that true? He nodded. Barely. 5 years. 5 years of lies. 5 years of shared beds, family dinners, birthday parties, and all of it built on betrayal. She wanted to vomit. But she didn't. Instead, she stood up. You can have each other, she said. But you will not take my child. And you will not bury me in silence. Then she walked out. She stayed with Leanne again. Filed for divorce the next week. In a town like theirs, that was enough to turn whispers into a wildfire. Women crossed the street to avoid her. Church friends prayed for her soul. Men offered comfort in ways that made her stomach twist. But Cynthia didn't break. She got a job at the post office. Found a one-bedroom rental with peeling wallpaper and creaky floors. It smelled like freedom. It was hers. She named her son Matthew. Held him close every night and whispered, "I'll never lie to you." Not like they did. Tom didn't fight for custody. Maybe guilt. Maybe cowardice. Vivian married him 3 months later. Cynthia didn't attend the wedding. But she did send a card. Inside it, no note. Just one of the Polaroids. She never heard from them again. Cynthia's new apartment was far from perfect, but it had good bones, like her. The wallpaper peeled in the corners. The kitchen tiles were cracked. The windows whistled in winter. But it was hers. No one stood over her shoulder, no one watched her husband when she wasn't looking, and no one called betrayal, just something that happened. She worked the early shift at the post office sorting mail, came home by 2, napped while Matthew did, and spent evenings rocking him, humming songs her mother once sang while peeling potatoes. Money was tight, but her soul was lighter. But the town didn't forget. Women who used to wave now kept their eyes forward. Leanne told her that Vivian had started attending the church ladies' meetings, always in the front row, always in pearls. She presented herself as a victim of confusion, someone who had simply followed her heart. What made it worse was how easily people believed her. Vivian was polished. Soft-spoken. Cynthia, thin, pale, tired, looked the part of the bitter ex. But Cynthia didn't care. Not about whispers. Not about judgment. Until the envelope came. It arrived in mid-November, thick paper, no return address. She almost didn't open it, thought it might be one of those holiday donation letters. Inside, a summons. Tom was filing for joint custody. She sat on the couch, hands numb, staring at the paper like it had betrayed her too. He hadn't called. Hadn't written. Hadn't sent a single dollar in child support. And now, this. Leanne came over that night. Read the letter, lips tightening with every line. "This is Vivian," she said finally. "You know that, right? She's behind this. She couldn't keep the man, so now she wants the baby." Cynthia nodded. She didn't have the strength to speak. The first hearing was in early December. Cynthia wore her best blouse, navy blue, ironed 3 times. She pulled her hair back, practiced sitting with her hands folded, eyes forward. Tom came in wearing a new blazer. Vivian sat behind him. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup subtle. She didn't look at Cynthia once. The courtroom was cold. The judge was young. And the lawyer Tom had hired was slick, well-dressed, and full of gentle venom. They painted Cynthia as unstable. Emotional. Claimed she'd disappeared from the marital home without warning. That she'd denied Tom access to his child. That she may be suffering from postpartum anxiety. Cynthia wanted to scream. But she didn't. When it was her turn, she stood up and spoke clearly. She brought copies of the Polaroids. She submitted a written statement from Leanne. She provided receipts, every doctor visit, every diaper, every bottle she'd paid for alone. By the time she finished, the courtroom was dead silent. The judge didn't rule that day. But Cynthia walked out knowing something had shifted. Vivian's face, pale, jaw clenched, was all the proof she needed. The final ruling came 2 weeks later, full custody awarded to Cynthia. No visitation rights without a formal request and supervised setting. She won. But it didn't feel like victory. Because in the back of her mind, there was always the question, what if they try again? So she kept records. Took photographs. Documented every scrape on Matthew's knee. She became her own lawyer, doctor, teacher. She didn't date. Didn't drink. Barely slept. She just mothered. And survived. And then, one day, her father knocked on her door. She hadn't seen him since she left. He looked older. Smaller. Like someone had wrung the spirit out of him. "I heard about the custody thing," he said, standing in the doorway, hands shoved in his coat pockets. She crossed her arms. "You knew, didn't you?" He didn't ask what she meant. Just nodded. "For how long?" she asked. He sighed. "They were sneaking around before you got married. I caught them once. Thought it was just a phase. Vivian told me you wouldn't handle the truth well. Said it'd crush you." Cynthia laughed. Bitter. Sharp. "I was already crushed. I just didn't know it. I didn't know what to do," he mumbled. "I thought it would stop." She shut the door in his face. It took a long time to feel human again. But slowly, with time, Cynthia rebuilt. Matthew learned to walk. Then to talk. He asked where his daddy was. She told him the truth, gently, carefully. That some people make mistakes, and some don't deserve second chances. She saved up. Bought a second-hand car. Enrolled in night classes at the community college. She found strength in the small things, Matthew's giggles, the smell of fresh bread, the sun warming the front steps in March. The pain never left completely. But it dulled. Faded like a bruise. Years passed. Then, one spring morning, she got a phone call from the hospital. Vivian had overdosed. Sleeping pills. They weren't sure if it was an accident. Tom had checked her in. And then vanished. Cynthia didn't attend the funeral. She just took Matthew to the park, bought him a cherry snow cone, and sat on a bench watching the world move on. And for the first time in a long time, she felt something like peace. The last time Cynthia saw Tom Dillon, it was raining, not the soft kind of rain that settles into the soil, but the angry kind that slaps against the windshield like it's trying to break in. She was 47. Matthew was 27 and living in Chicago, working at a logistics firm and dating a girl with a hyphenated last name. He didn't come home as often as she would have liked, but when he did, he brought flowers and made coffee just the way she liked it. Cynthia never remarried. Never had to. That morning, she was loading groceries into her trunk when she saw him, Tom, across the parking lot. Thinner, stooped, gray at the temples. The wind caught his coat like a sheet on a line. For a second, she thought she was hallucinating. He looked up. Their eyes met. She didn't look away. He walked over slowly, hesitantly, like a man afraid of his own shadow. "CYN," he said, voice gravelly with time. She said nothing. Just waited. "I heard you're living out by Riverbend now." She nodded. "That's right. I heard about Matt. Big job, huh?" "He's doing all right. They stood there in silence, the kind that comes when you both imagine this conversation 100 different ways and now realize none of them fit. "I'm sick," he said finally. Cynthia raised an eyebrow. "I figured." He chuckled once, a dry, hollow sound. "Liver. Too much whiskey, not enough regrets. You always were good at drinking." Another beat. "I'm not here for sympathy," he added. "Or forgiveness. Just didn't want to die without seeing you once." "Then you've done what you came for." He nodded. Before he turned to go, he paused. Was he happy? Matt? Growing up? She looked him in the eye, firm, steady. He had a mother who loved him. That's more than most. Tom left. That was the last she ever saw of him. When he died 4 months later, Cynthia read the obituary in silence, folded it in half, and dropped it in the trash. She didn't cry. She didn't even flinch. That same summer, Matthew came home for a long weekend. He was older now, broader shoulders, softer eyes, the kind of man who grew up with both wounds and wisdom. They sat on the porch one evening, the sky pink with sunset, a bottle of lemonade between them. "Mom," he said, voice low, "can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why didn't I ever know him?" "My dad." Cynthia exhaled slowly. She'd known this would come. One day. She told him everything. Not with bitterness, not with drama, just truth. How Tom had betrayed her. How Vivian was more than just a stepmother. How the people closest to you can sometimes cut the deepest. Matthew sat quiet for a long time. And then, gently, "I'm sorry you went through that." She reached over, took his hand. "I'm not. Not anymore. Because it gave me you. And I'd go through hell twice for that." He smiled. "Still. You didn't deserve it. No woman does." A year later, Cynthia retired from the post office. Bought a tiny house by the lake with blue shutters and a screened-in porch. She planted hydrangeas, took up painting, joined a book club. People in the neighborhood called her Miss C and waved when she passed. But the past still lived somewhere in her, like a scar beneath a sleeve. And it wasn't until one strange afternoon that she finally let it go. She was cleaning the attic, sorting old photo boxes, letters, things she hadn't touched in decades, when she found the envelope. Yellowed with time. Inside, the original Polaroids. And a letter. It was from Vivian. Unopened. Dated 2 months before her overdose. With shaking hands, Cynthia read it. "Cynthia. I know I don't deserve your time. Or your forgiveness. But I'm writing this because I've run out of people to lie to, and I think I need to tell at least one truth before I go. I didn't love him. Not really. Not the way I should have. But I loved being chosen. I loved being better than you, if only in secret. And that makes me uglier than I ever want to admit. You were the daughter I never knew how to mother. And I destroyed the only good thing I had left, your trust. I hope you made it. I hope you burned all the bridges and built your own damn town on the other side. If you did, then maybe not everything I touched turned to ash. I'm sorry. Vivian." Cynthia folded the letter. Sat back. She didn't cry. She didn't forgive. But she did feel something like finality. That night, she burned the letter in the fireplace. Watched the flames eat every lie, every half-truth, every stolen moment. And for the first time in 40 years, she slept without dreaming. Some stories don't end with revenge. Some end with a woman walking away, head high, heart scarred but intact, while the people who tried to break her are buried beneath the silence they created. Cynthia didn't just survive them. She erased them. And that's why, to this day, when she tells the story, she starts with the truth, not the pain. Because it was never about what they did. It was about what she did next.